For decades, it's been the great white whale of Hollywood, the live-action anime adaptation. And for just as long, it's been a major source of pain for fans. But in 2023, Netflix set sail with a franchise so massive, so beloved, it seemed absolutely destined to sink. Instead, it conquered the world. Today, we're explaining how One Piece did the impossible.
To really understand this huge victory, you first have to understand the epic losing streak that came before it. I mean, if you're a fan, you've seen this story play out time and time again. A beloved anime gets a live-action announcement, you feel a little glimmer of hope, and then it's just disappointment. It's a literal graveyard of projects that never seem to get what made the original so special.
And you know, when you look closely at that graveyard, you find a pretty common cause of death. For years, Hollywood producers they thought they knew better than the person who actually created the world in the first place. They ignored the vision, they ignored the tone, they ignored the very soul of the story they were supposed to be adapting.
But One Piece, well, it wasn't just another attempt. It was a fundamental shift in strategy. It was this massive, multi-million-dollar bet on a completely different way of doing things. And let me tell you, it paid off in a way that I don't think anybody could have predicted.
So, to truly appreciate what Netflix and the team behind One Piece pulled off, we first need to understand the curse they were up against. And this wasn't just a creative challenge, right? It was about overcoming decades of some really deep-seated skepticism from the audience.
This perfectly captures the cycle of pain for anime fans. On the left, you've got what everyone is hoping for, a faithful, high-quality adaptation that actually honors the creator. And on the right, that's the Hollywood reality we usually got. Stories stripped of their identity, productions that just felt cheap, and a complete disregard for the source material. It was a recipe for failure every single time.
So how did One Piece break the curse? Well, it all started by flipping the old Hollywood script and giving absolute power to one single person. This wasn't a decision made by some creative committee. It was about trusting the vision of the master himself.
And that person is Eiichiro Oda, the legendary creator of One Piece. For the Netflix series, his executive producer title wasn't just for show. As he put it himself, he was the guard dog, making sure his creation, his entire life's work, was protected at every single stage of the process.
Now, what's so interesting about this slide is this one sentence is the key to everything. This wasn't just consulting, this was final approval, full veto power. Oda had the ability to halt the entire production if it didn't meet his standards. I mean, think about that. That is a totally unprecedented level of control for a creator in a project this big.
And he used that power. Oh, he absolutely used it. He had the final say on every script, every single casting decision. He even demanded expensive reshoots for whole scenes that he felt just weren't good enough to put out into the world. So this wasn't some suggestion box. Oda's notes were non-negotiable directives that literally shaped the final product.
Okay, so with the creator's vision secured, the next challenge was, well, immense. How in the world do you bring one of the most imaginative and kind of bizarre worlds in fiction to life without it looking ridiculous?
You start with a budget that shows you're serious. A reported $18 million an episode. That's more than the final season of Game of Thrones. But see, the money itself wasn't the solution. The real magic was in the philosophy behind how every single dollar was spent.
And this brilliantly illustrates their strategy: grounded fantasy. They built enormous, real-life pirate ships in South Africa. The actors were walking on real steel and real wood, not just performing in a green void. The costumes looked lived in, not like some pristine cosplay you just pulled out of a bag. It all served one goal: to make this unbelievable world feel tactile, weighted, and, well, real.
But look, a beautiful world is just an empty set without the right people in it. For a story that's so character-driven like One Piece, casting wasn't just important, it was everything. And finding the soul of the Straw Hat Pirates, that was probably the biggest challenge of them all.
So the search for Monkey D. Luffy, a character of just pure, infectious optimism, was considered almost impossible. But when Eiichiro Oda saw Iñaki Godoy's audition, he just knew. He said he saw the real-life version of the character he'd created decades ago. Now that's not just a good casting choice. That feels like destiny.
And that dedication went through the whole crew. Iñaki mastered that impossible tightrope walk of being joyful without ever being annoying. Mac and Yu went through intense physical training to make Zoro's three-sword style look believable. And Taz Skylar became a legitimate high-kicking chef for his role as Sanji. They didn't just play these characters, they embodied them.
So, you have the creator's blessing, a massive budget used wisely, and a perfectly cast crew. The stage was set. But the question remained, would the world actually watch? And the answer was a resounding, record-breaking yes.
One Piece didn't just do well. It had a historically dominant debut. It hit the #1 spot on Netflix in 84 countries. At the same time, that smashed a record previously held by streaming giants like Stranger Things and Wednesday. Just incredible.
And the reception was just overwhelmingly positive. You had critics who were sharpening their knives, expecting another disaster, and they were completely disarmed by the show's sincerity and its heart. But more importantly, the fans, the toughest critics of all, they gave it a staggering 95% approval rating. They could feel the love and respect that was put into it.
The show's reach was just staggering. It didn't just become the most watched show on Netflix for the second half of 2023. No, it did something truly rare. It was so successful that it drove this massive wave of new viewers to the original anime, more than doubling its viewership on the platform. It created a global cultural moment.
And all of that record-breaking success means one thing for fans, both new and old. The Grand Line adventure is only just beginning.
Yeah, Netflix quickly gave the green light for a second season, and while we don't have a release date just yet, we know the story is set to adapt several more iconic arcs from the manga, taking the Straw Hats to legendary spots like Luga Town, Drum Island, and the very entrance to the Grand Line itself.
So, the success of One Piece seems to offer a really clear lesson. Trust the creator, invest in practical world building, and find a cast with heart. But this leaves us with the ultimate question for the future of adaptations. Is this a repeatable blueprint for success, or was the magic of One Piece just a once-in-a-generation phenomenon? Only time will tell.